Hi, and welcome to our webinar, SSRS Part 2, Making SSRS Reports Do Things You Didn't Know They Could. We are glad you could join us. My name is Brokken, and I'm a Senior Business Development Exec here at KTL. Your presenter will be Minal Wad, a business consultant here at KTL. We will keep everyone muted so there will be no feedback. If anyone has a question, you can submit it through the chat window located on your lower right of your screen. If everyone is ready, we will get started. Minal, take it away.
Thank you, Alex. My name is Minal, and I would like to welcome you all for today's webinar on SSRS reports in GP 2015 R2. Excuse me. So this is the second part of the series that we have been doing. So if you have not watched the first part, I would suggest that you go back and watch it, or if you just want to refresh the course, we have it uploaded on our website, KTL Solutions website. It's under events and webinars. So if you want to go back and check it out. So let's go through the overview and let's see what we're going to cover today in the webinar. Very quickly, I'll just go through what we did in part one in case the memory is blurred there. And we'll continue from where we left off in the previous series. And we will start with customizing an existing GP report, and then we'll create a specific report for expecting parameters from GP window, and we'll look into how we can pass the parameters from GP window to the report directly. We'll explore more into the report security, the filtering, the various levels where you can achieve that. And then we will also quickly go through the new feature of 2015 R2, which is Refreshable Excel reports. So that's the plan. And thanks again for joining. Okay, before we start with creating a custom report, let's quickly go back and see what we did last time. I have GP 2015 R2 on the screen, and if I go to the Dynamics menu on top, and then if I go to Tools, Setup, and then System, and I see an option for setting up the reporting tools. When you open that window, you have different settings where you can achieve reporting services, Excel reports, and management reports. So in part one, we finished the reporting services. We set up the URL for it. We deployed all the reports. The GP comes with existing reports, so we deployed them. And once that is deployed, all the SSRS reports are handy for us to use outside GP. And I'm going to browse to the reporting server URL. Is the same thing what we entered here. If I browse to that, I'm going to see all the reports under the company folder. And there are different subfolders for every category. And I'm going to go in sales. Now there is another folder called charts and KPIs that we talked about last time. This is the folder where all the customized reports, all the newer reports go in. Now if you are to create new reports, then you have to put them here specifically, because that only then these reports will be visible to you in GP. So last time, very quickly, we created a sample report. It's called Sample Customer List Report, and that's just going to list out all the customers. And then we associated that report to one of the windows in GP. And I have pulled up customer maintenance window in front of us. And if you go to available reports, there you see the sample list report. And if you click here, is going to run the report, same report for you. So this is what we did last time. And I'm going to start now by creating a new report, a custom report for customers. If I go to the report server, I see a button for report builder. If I click on that, it's going to do this launching application thing. And what is happening behind the scenes is click once deployment is getting all the files required for you to open the report builder. You really don't need it installed on your computer. If it is not installed, it will get it from the internet. I'm going to say new report and give me a blank report. I'm going to call it as customer information for a specific customer, just to be, something out there. And I'm going to save this report under the folder that we talked about, charts and KPI. I'm going to call it customer info formation, and it's a custom report. So let's do that. Now, first thing you have to establish is the data source, and we have to create a new data source for it. Now, on the bottom where my cursor is, it says that currently it is connected to the reporting server, and which means that we have access to all the data sources that's already there. So I'm going to pick the option for use a shared connection, and then I'm going to browse to it through here. It's taking me back to the report server. If I pick the data source, I can pick one of these that's already out there, and you can test the connection and say okay. Now that we have the data source, we have a connection to the SQL server. The next thing is to get a data set. A data set is the information that we want to display in the report. So I'm going to create a new data set, and I'm going to say use the data source that I created just now as text, and we can write a text here, and you can have a stored procedure that can run from here. It can be anything. So I just wrote a quick query of selecting everything from the customer where the customer number is equal to the input parameter that we're going to create. So I don't want the information for all the customers. I want it only for a specific customer, and we are going to pass that customer. I'm going to call it as the customer number. I say okay, and then very quickly we can just put a few fields on the report. I'm going to keep it basic, so let's just put a few things out there, so like customer number, customer name, or maybe contact person. Now, if you run this report right now in the report builder, you are prompted to enter a customer number in Aaron Fit 0001. Oh, okay. So if I enter a customer number, I get the customer details. Everything is looking good so far. So I'm going to go back to my GP window, And under available reports now, I'm going to say, assign me another report. And I'm going to pick that report we called as customer information custom. So I'm going to pick that report and insert it in the selected report. Say OK. So what that means is when I'm in GP and when I'm in this window for customer maintenance, I can always go to available reports and run that report. Okay, so that runs fine. But what is happening here is as soon as we click the report, it is just taking us to the report server, and we have to hand enter the employee, the customer ID again. And this is not what we want. We really want the GP to pass the parameters directly to the report. So what's going on here? The caveat behind this is the report parameters for your custom reports, they have to match exactly of what is being passed by the window. So when you are in GP, when you click on a particular report, behind the scene, there is the dexterity is calling a URL for the reports, and it is putting some parameters in there. And if we match the names correctly, the custom report then would automatically get all the past parameters. So let's try to achieve that now. I'm going back to my report, going back to the design, and on the left-hand side, you see the report data where you have all the list of parameters. I'm going to rename this guy over here. So, or I can also go back to my data set because I'm calling the parameter in there, so data set properties, and I'm going to call this as customer number, because that's how it is passed from the GP window. I'm going to say OK. So it's going to create another parameter by that name. And I don't need this parameter anymore. I'm just going to delete that. Okay. Now let's run this report again from the report builder. Let's see if everything is working fine. Okay, I still see the information, the report is working fine. So that's good. I'm going to go back in GP now. And under the available reports, I'm going to call the customer information custom. Okay, there you go. So now the customer information, the customer number is getting passed as a parameter to my custom SSRS report. So that makes it easy because then you get the feel that this report is really within GP and inside GP. And right now I just have one parameter. There could be like 5 or 6. It really is helpful if the GP window is passing all the default parameters and things like that. Now, I myself had that question that, what if I want to pass other fields on this window? For example, I want to pass the class ID as a parameter for my report. Would that be possible? And the answer is no, it is not. Because there might be few changes that we need to do to the dexterity code, the way it calls the URL, because the URL is really generally just putting few things from the window when it is making a call. So we do need some customization there. If you want to, let's say, pass a field that is not very typical, for example, UPS zone, or it can be anything that is, not very popular. To my observation, all the primary keys on the table, for example, the customer table, which is RM00101 in the database, has got the primary key of customer number. So all the important and the primary keys and all the important columns are passed in the URL. Other than that, a little bit customization is required. So that's that. Now, there is also a way to create default parameters. So for example, I have not selected anything from my customer ID. And what happens if I come here and then pick my custom customer information report? I get to the page and there is nothing filled in there. Maybe maybe I don't want this. I want a behavior where by default I want to pick the first customer. So let's see if we can achieve that. So I'm going back to the report builder, to the design, and then on the left hand side there's a list of parameters. I'm going to pick the properties, and I have this available where we can set the default values. Let's go there. Right now it is selected as no default values. So I can say specify values and add, and then I can say Aaron fit 0001. Okay, and hit OK. So by default, and if I run it, by default, it's always going to print Aaron fits information if there is no customer pass. Now let's check this behavior from GP. In the available reports, if there is no customer picked, and if I go to a custom report, it's going to open up with the default value. So that's how you can set the default parameters for the report. Okay. So we covered how to pass the parameters from GP window to SSRS reports, and we also saw how to set up the default parameters. So I'm going to move ahead now. The next thing, what we're going to do is user-specific reports. Now, sometimes there is a need where you don't want to show everything to everybody in the reports. So, for example, a salesperson can have few accounts under him, and you don't want to show the details of the accounts that don't belong to him. Or it could be at the HR payroll level, where you don't want any employee see other person's salary. That would not be something that you want. So all these things we can achieve, make filtering out the data per the user. Now there are different ways you can do it. One is just to alter the content of the report, and that happens when you fetch the data, and it can happen inside the query, or you can also have permissions and rights set up in the SSRS world. So even before the data gets to the report. So I'm going to first cover the content level filtering. I'm going to open the SQL Server Management Studio. I'm connected to the database, and the company database is 2. So if I expand that, I see the tables and the views and the stored procedures and things like that. Now you can have security set up here on the views level. If I right click a view and go to properties, there is permissions that you can set up here, saying that who can select, who can grant. You can grant different permissions depending on the login. Every user in GP has got a SQL authentication login created. So based on that, you can have different permissions set up. Or it can be at the level of a stored procedure, where this is a stored procedure that gets called on the customer maintenance window. It's called seek customer information, and here there are a couple of ways to do it. Either you do right click properties, and then security, permissions, and then set up the permissions here. Or you can pass a parameter and then play with it. Like, you can pass a parameter where you get the user ID, and then you put logic inside the stored procedure or the view saying that if the user does not have permissions, then don't give back any data. So we'll do something. I just want to demonstrate one example for that. And I just want to give you a few other ways you can tackle that situation. But that requires a bit of customization. You would require a bit of development time there. But that's one way of doing it. And then I'm going to go back and demonstrate how you can filter out the data at the report level. Uh, so under the list of available, I'm back on the customer maintenance screen, and under the list of available reports, I'm going to assign another report, and then we can customize it a little bit. For example, let's see, customer information. This report is out of the box. It's available for us to use and modify. So we're going to make use of that. And if I go there and try to print out the customer information, I see information about the selected customer. And there are sections where there is sales information and payment information, and a salesperson is assigned to a customer. So for example, if the logic says that I don't want to show the information if the salesperson, if the logged in user is not the salesperson. If there is somebody else logged in, I don't even want to share that information. It's very confidential, for example. So let's go back to the report builder, and then we're going to try to modify this behavior. I'm going to open an existing report. So I picked open in under two, sales, customer information. And I don't want to overwrite the existing report. And if I want to make a custom report out of it, I need to save it under that special folder. So let's do that. I'm going to say save as in the special folder for charts and KPIs. I'm going to change the title of the report, just so that we know this is the one that we created. And then I'm going to introduce a special field, which is built in SSRS. So on the left-hand side, if I expand the built-in fields, I see that special field. It's called user ID. So SSRS grabs the user ID of the person who is executing the report or running the report. So we'll make use of that. Okay, let's see, and let's run and check. Okay, so this report with custom visibility, if we run as is, I can see the person who is running the report. It's KTL email server MWAD, and that's my identity. I'm going to use this identity to filter out data. So again, going back to design, under the data set, I'm going to pick the data set that's already there. It's called customer information. we're going to go to the properties, and then this is the built-in report. So it is calling a store procedure, see customer information, which we just looked at. And there are fields and options, but we're interested in the filtering part of it. And we can add different criteria here to filter out data. So let's add one that says salesperson ID, something like that. Is the salesperson ID is equal to the built-in fields user ID. So I know for sure that I'm not the salesperson for this customer. So when I run the report, it's not showing me anything. Nothing is selected. So it is filtering out data at the report level, depending on the user. I think another question that you might be thinking about, and I thought the same, is the identity that is trapped by SSRS is Windows authentication, is the Windows user ID. It has got the domain name and slash and the username. But when you are inside GP, you have GP username and the GP login. So we need to find a way to associate somebody in GP to this Active Directory login. So one way of doing that, I feel, is, let's go back to, if only there was a way we can associate a salesperson, for example, with a Active Directory account. So I'm going to go to salesperson, and if I pick somebody, the first person from there, I don't see any place where you can do that. So there is a possibility that if you want that association to happen, there's always a possibility of customizing it, and we can put a field, for example, out here that says Active Directory login, and then a user can select and associate a salesperson with Active Directory login. So that way, you can make use of that association inside the SSRS report to filter out data for a specific user. So we discussed how we can filter data at the content level, and we can also use the Windows user ID to adjust the visibility of the report once the data is fetched from the database. Next, we are going to talk about just the rights and permissions to run the report and see the data inside there, things like that. So to do that, we have to go to the report server, and I'm going to go to the home. That's where I am. And then there is, on the top right corner, you will see home, my subscriptions, and site settings. So let's go to site settings. And under the security, this is where you can assign new roles to individuals, and then grant them what things that they can do, whether they can see the reports, whether they can run the reports. If you click a new role, you can have a group or a particular user, and then select the role. And I have done that for my account, and then the administrators on this machine. So if you don't have that, you cannot even browse to this. You're going to get the 404 error saying that the website cannot be found, or you do not have permissions to view this page. And not only here, you sometimes also have to set it on the folder level. So for example, for 2, inside 2, if I want to just have salespeople run the sales report, then inside this folder, I can then adjust the folder settings. This is only for that particular folder. And then I can edit the securities. And it's going to prompt me that do you want to inherit it from the parent? So you can say accordingly yes or no. Or do you want to have specific individuals have access to that? Once all this is set up, the users can browse and run the reports from here or from JP. Okay, I'm going to go back to the presentation slide.
One second, Minal's reconnecting.